Hello again to another Agakala Reacts, and today we'll be watching Europe Needs Better Cultural Representation from Folk Walk. I don't think I've ever seen anything from that channel, so let's just go and see. And we see here Henry Cavill as Witcher, so it must be something in regards of Central and Eastern European.
I often criticize Netflix on this channel because they've butchered The Witcher. Part of that is the awful writing, and that is the biggest problem with the show. But a big part of that is also the portrayal of the world. There are two big aspects that create the world of The Witcher in my opinion. The first is the folklore aspect, which is represented by the customs, traditions, village culture, folklore creatures, inspiration by legends, fairy tales, oral tradition, and so on. The second is the medieval aspect, which is represented by royalty, military, knights, armors, swords and other weapons, castles, medieval towns, and so on. I want to make a video in the future about how Netflix butchered the medieval aspect of The Witcher and what they should have done. It is definitely on them to do proper research on this and to portray the culture faithfully instead of going just for the most lazy generic fantasy visual. And as Europeans, we should criticize them for the way they've portrayed our culture and that they essentially ignored its influence on The Witcher. But at the same time, I'm a big fan of something that Razorfist once said, and that's don't just cry about the culture, create the culture. So in this case, it would be something like, don't just cry that Hollywood is misrepresenting your culture. You need to represent it yourself.
Oh, you're right about
and
that.
as Europeans, we unfortunately suck at that. I understand that it was hard in the past, because we didn't have the internet and especially social media, which would connect us with the rest of the world. For example, before I fell in love with The Witcher in 2007, my biggest love was this little German game called Gothic. I use the word little a bit facetiously here because it's huge in Central Europe and especially in Poland, but we love it in my country as well. But that's the problem. The game became huge only in Central Europe because the publisher only ever properly marketed the game here. And I really believe that if they marketed the game internationally and especially in the US, Gothic could have been a competitor to the Elder Scrolls series nowadays, because at the time the game was in many aspects ahead of what Bethesda was doing. But because the publisher didn't market it properly in the US and they didn't make it available on consoles, Bytes and their games never really took off internationally and they never got the success they deserved. Now it looks like Embracer will shut them down, which is so sad to see. So yeah, it was definitely harder in
I mean,
the
I never
past,
heard about this game,
but we have no excuse nowadays since social media democratized access to international audiences. Europeans unfortunately still don't understand this because they are too used to creating movies, shows, games and other media only for themselves. As I've mentioned in many of my videos, we have many of these live-action fairy tales in my country, and they were unfortunately created only for the Czech audience, which is understandable because the best ones are the older ones, which were created under the fucking communist regime, but I don't understand why nobody has tried to translate them into English after the Velvet Revolution. I think that people abroad would love them if they could see them. I'm actually sometimes thinking that I'll do it myself in the future. But even the more recent fairy tales are created just for the Czech audience and nobody is trying to export our culture abroad. The only fairy tale from recent years that tried to be innovative is The Princess Cursed in Time. They've created English dubbing for it and it has been on Netflix for a while. The problem with this fairy tale is that it's trying to be more of a fantasy inspired by the culture from the West, so there's not much Czech culture left in it, and it doesn't represent actual Czech fairy tales very well, but I need to do a separate video about that where I'll explain that in detail. Another example that bothers me is the Hexer. Like, why isn't there an official version with English subtitles or even
after
dubbing
so many
yet?
years, it's true.
It seems that people would be really interested in that. And why is there no official English version for the movie with Fire and Sword?
I'm sorry.
It's such a great movie that people...
I mean, obviously I've seen it. It's one of our main cultural books that every Polish kid have to read. Well, in my school times anyway, we had to read those books. I didn't, but But I thought that would be out there.
People abroad should know. My point is that Europeans often create culture only for themselves. And
again,
I
the
think
post
it's
gets really
stupid.
good too on YouTube.
Netflix showed us that if you give people access to it, shows from anywhere in the world can be huge
True.
hits with international audiences. People are interested in other cultures, and it seems to me that most Europeans still haven't figured this out. What pisses me off even more is that some people from my country now copy culture from the US. For example, there's this guy who became big on YouTube by interviewing Czech celebrities while they eat hot food. Sounds familiar?
Yep.
It seems so lazy and lame to me to take something that was created by Americans and do it exactly the same way, just in Czech. Isn't our culture rich enough? Do we now have to copy successful things Americans did?
Fortunately,
If
that
anything,
often
we should
happens though.
export our culture. We don't need to import culture from the USA. I think that Americans are historically pretty good at doing that themselves. We fortunately have a few good examples of making our culture and history here in Central Europe known worldwide. The first one is of course The Witcher, which has really put Slavic culture on the map with the success of the third game. The second one is Kingdom Come Deliverance, which made part of our history relevant to people abroad, and some of them are now coming to the Czech Republic specifically because they want to visit the places from the game. Like, before KCD came out, there was no tourist from abroad who would want to visit, for example, Sasau Monastery. And that's what happens when you present your culture to the rest of the world. If it's something people haven't seen yet and it's sort of a hole on the market, people will be interested in it, and they might even want to visit your country just so they can experience the culture themselves. So you can support your country in a way. That's why I started this channel, because I saw the success of these two games, and because most people see mainly just the medieval aspects in both of them, I said to myself, well, nobody is really talking about the folklore aspect, and since I grew up in a small village and I always loved fairy tales and folklore, I could talk about that. And I wish more people would do this, especially in parts of the world that's not very well represented in the mainstream. For example, I have this fantasy book called Rage of Dragons, which is inspired by African culture, and I would love to know more about African folklore. So yeah, I hope that people will take something from this video, and hopefully we'll have more creators representing their culture, because if you leave it up to Hollywood, they will butcher it. And the important part is that you need to make your content available in English, and not just in your language. I think that's self-evident, but you never know. Anyway, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Okay, that was really interesting to watch. Well, I'm Polish, he's Czech, so obviously we I agree with him in the fact that we should be able at this stage in time to, if there is something released, to have the movies or books being able translated actually easier. I think with the books and things like that, I don't think it should be that hard to make ebooks in English. Like, just get the translation done, and you don't even, because I understand that with actual physical books it's obviously much more harder, but with the whole thing about just being able to download an ebook from like your e-store, like Amazon or Kindle or things like that, that shouldn't be that hard to do, in my opinion. The publishers in Poland, I remember years ago when I was reading these Polish books and I was telling my Irish friend here, and he would like, oh, it's there in English translation. I said, I don't think so, that just recently came in. So I actually sent a message to the publisher on back on Facebook, and they just said, oh, they wish someone would do it. And I'm like, yeah, but no one's gonna be doing it on their own. Like, you just have to get someone to do it for you, I think. So that haven't happened yet, and those books are massive in Poland. So that's this. In regards of Witcher, the Polish show and movie, I've seen it 20-something years ago, obviously. It was not good. I remember that it was not considered being good even then when it came out. Mind, I read short stories of Sapkowski about Witcher in my teenage years in fantasy. I just have Polish word now for that for the thing. It's just basically there's a magazine in the fantasy, science fiction and fantasy magazine that they were shown. That this is actually the same magazine that Sapkowski wrote as an for the contest about Witcher first in the 1980s. So I grew up with Witcher, reading the short stories then because my mother used to read that magazine pretty much since I was born. So that magazine was always around the house, and this is where my love for science fiction and fantasy came from as well. But so I grew up with reading Witcher, and then the show came up, and the movie came up as well, and well, that was not that great. And I remember a few years later when the Night Watch movies came out from Russia in like 2003 or 2004, and that's based on Łukanienko's books as well. The books are absolutely amazing as well. The movie, it's unbelievable. The amount of the really good visual effects is just mind-blowing for me. That movie is just a must-watch for any science fiction fan. So anyway, that's this. And I think that if it comes about Witcher now, what they did to the show on the Netflix, I'm still gonna watch it. I wanna see what is gonna happen. I read the books just recently. I read the short stories years ago, but I didn't want to read the books for a really long time because there were few of them. But then after I read the whole 41 books of Terry Pratchett about Discord, I figured like 7 books in Polish, it's not that hard for me, isn't it? Yeah. But the author of this, the folk walk, the author of this video, he's absolutely right that we should be able to promote our own culture a bit more, and not just through like games that they're actually, I don't know, maybe not just that, but the games as well, like the Witcher, it's very much into folklore and all that, but that's kind of, he's right in the fact that Netflix didn't really do much to show what the folklore of Witcher is, because the folklore of Witcher is Slavic and Scandinavian. So they should kind of focus on that, but what we kind of see in that is, I don't know, it's like any other medieval stuff from Western Europe, or Hollywood in general, I think. Do I have anything else to say about it? The examples that he's shown of the movies, old movies and stuff from Czech, I don't know them. So basically, he's absolutely right in the fact that we just do stuff for ourselves. So like there's Polish movies that they've been shown in Poland mostly. Funny enough, I'm going to see a Polish movie where it's Sami Swoi, and it's called, one second. We're going to see, and it's a prequel to cult movies in Poland that they called Sami Swoi. That's obviously the first title, but it's prequel, so it have to be titled differently. So it's Początek, what means beginning, isn't it? Yeah, and it's from Poland, so yes, and I'm quite excited to go and see it. And I was quite sad that I wasn't able to see it in Poland because it was coming out on the same day I was leaving Poland in January. So, but I did see the other movie. It's Akademia Pana Kleksa. It's another cult movie as well, and it's kind of like a refresh on it. There are books and things. I mentioned that in about those in Dr. Seuss's video. That was last week, I think. Have you seen it? And he's absolutely right. We just do stuff for ourselves. Like, there is not much stuff that we would be able to see. Like, I always was kind of thinking that, well, I've seen some of those movies from, like, Italy about this princess when I was younger. I can't remember the titles now. Maybe someone will put in the comments. There was quite a lot of them. But I was, like, really, that was below, like, early 90s when I was watching it. So I can't really remember much about it. And yeah, we kind of like seem to get Americanized quite a lot. So, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!